What is up, everyone? I am Charlie Shrem, and you are listening and watching another epic episode of Untold Stories, where together, twice a week, we get to dive deep with some of crypto's most influential leaders, Bitcoin OGs, those who are building underground things that we don't hear about. I love the type of shows where I get to show you guys some really cool things that are being built in our industry. You're like, wow, I didn't even know this existed. To truly understand like how this movement came to be, we weave a whole nuanced narrative of the people that I've met along the way, teaching us both things, and then we trade off of it. We figure out how to like make good trades, protect ourselves, earn yields, self-sovereignty, maintain our own keys, understanding the differences between the spectrum of decentralization to be able to make the right decisions, to make the right choices, and feel comfortable that we're like doing this whole crypto thing the right way. That's my job. That's what I've been here for the past 3 years, for the past 10 years, helping you be doing, but on Untold Stories. And it's my pleasure. I'm really, really excited to show you guys some of the really cool things that my guest, Karl Jacob, is building. Karl, thank you so much for coming on Untold Stories today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. There's a lot of cool. Were you at Bitcoin Miami a few weeks ago?
I was actually, and spreading the stories about Bacon.
Yeah, Bacon Coin, Bacon Protocol. What did you think of the event?
You know, I actually went to the conference, the main conference, last year. So this year I skipped that and just stuck to the side things, which was, I think, the right call. As you get to know more people, it's the important meetings are outside of the conference rather than inside of the conference, as you probably know. So it's just great to talk to people and let them know about our progress, get feedback, and make some networking and potential deals.
The exhibit halls are usually like where you meet the coolest people, and that's where everything went down. Like I was thinking back about someone was showing me there was like some found footage. Vice, the company that they have like an HBO channel or whatever.
Right.
They found. They unearthed footage of Bitcoin 2013 in San Jose, that conference, and because they had sent they'd sent one of their journalists there, and he was recording, he interviewed everyone, but then like a month after he got back, he actually quit Vice and started a crypto company. So the footage was never seen, and so just a few months ago, they called me over to their office in Washington D.C. They're like, Charlie, you got to see this stuff with you and your girlfriend, who's now my wife, Courtney. He's like 10 years later, you got to see this footage. You guys were dating. So it's like me, and then I'm like yelling across the room to Brian Armstrong, who's the only one running the Coinbase booth at the time. He's the CEO. And you got Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss wearing the BitInstant t-shirt in my booth over there. And then you had like all these different folks who are running the companies today. But we were all in the exhibit hall. I don't even remember. Then they showed me a video of my speech. And I remember my like chief of marketing said, Charlie, you got to like prepare a speech. You can't just wing it. I said, no, I'm just so excited. I brought a t-shirt launcher with me. I was like launching BitInstant t-shirts. Like those are the early Bitcoin conferences. Crazy stuff.
I love it. I mean, that's how this all starts. It's how the internet started. It's how a lot of the social media stuff started. People forget that there are those days when it's just a few people really on a dream and, making it happen and building things and making mistakes and failing and restarting, and you end up here where things seem to be getting quite a bit of traction.
It's interesting that you and I'm actually excited to talk to you because you have this company LoanSnap that's very established, been around for a while. You guys have had multiple rounds of funding from all the marquee names like Richard Branson's Virgin Group, and you have Greylock and Benchmark. If you've watched the Uber show, Benchmark was the one who they like brought Uber from their seed stage to where it is today, multi-billion-dollar company. You've been around the block and you started this really cool company, and we were doing the research. You guys, I wish I had known this company existed a few years ago when I was looking for a mortgage, but you use like smart loan technology that uses AI to fully capture like a person's entire financial picture and then show them how they can benefit from a smart loan. And that's not even what I want to talk about. Like, that's really cool. But what's super cool is you took this technology and you launched this thing called you call it Bacon Coin or Bacon Protocol?
Yeah, so Bacon Protocol is the core protocol, and then Bacon is the governance token, and BHUM is the stable coin that we built. So yeah, we've got a lot of stuff going on.
What's going on here? Like, start from the beginning.
Yeah, so I think the beginning really was, as you pointed out, we had a great mortgage company that was doing fantastic stuff. in that area, closing loans in 24 hours, which is unheard of in that space. And then we think about what does it look like? And part of that was really figuring out, okay, could we actually close not just tens of thousands of loans a month, but hundreds of thousands? And the realization was no. And that wasn't because of us. It was because the people buying the loans moved so slowly and were so strict and rigorous about what they were looking for. We like to say that no consumer woke up one morning and invented the 30-year mortgage. That's a banking government thing. And that goes back to kind of the history of mortgage. Mortgage is effectively the underpinning of a lot of the economy. There's $13 trillion of them in the world. $3 trillion of those mortgages sit on the balance sheet for the federal government. So they are used by these very large institutions to preserve and grow their wealth. We saw that and recognized that that was a very powerful system that the mortgage industry didn't participate in. So effectively, we created a loan. Everybody in the space created a loan and then sold it to these other people who made all the money. And they made it in kind of an odd way. So they basically took money from people's savings accounts. You put your money in a bank and they would give you 0.1% and they would lend that money out at 3%. And I think this is one of the great things about DeFi is we're flipping that system around and changing it so that the lion's share of the return goes to the people who actually invest the money. I think the key story there is one of my investors, and you mentioned Richard Branson and some others, asked me a very interesting question. It's great that you're doing X number of loans per month, but what about 100,000 a month? And that was really what drove this: is how do we get to a point where we can do loans in 24 hours and hundreds of thousands of them, and really hopefully save billions for our customers, which is our real goal. And that challenged us. And the context was, I said, well, that's impossible. And one of my investors said, well, I went to space. And so that kind of changes your frame of reference a little bit and makes you think it's possible. We're not there yet, but the systems are in place to do exactly that, to ensure that we can save our customers billions of dollars. And along the way, help people around the world participate in this market that they were locked out of. And even if they could get into it, they were getting 0.1% when the banks were getting 3%.
I think I read in China that the real estate market is like a multi-double-digit percentage of their GDP. It's like 20 or 30% or something like that. So if there was like a property crisis there, you're talking about like, huge percentage of their whole gross domestic product. So this is definitely, I don't know what that number is in the US, but I assume it's also very high. Of course, we're more diversified. But the mortgage industry, you said $3 trillion sits on the Fed's balance sheet. I don't know what the number is like of the total trillion in the US. But it's like, it's not only a big part of a person's financial planning. You have a 30-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage. You kind of plan your whole next 3 decades around that. You talk about, okay, let me figure out how I'm going to pay it back. So when I turn 60, I could refinance and live off the retirement and then pass that down to my children. Like a property in other places of the world is something that people never sell. But I like going through that process myself. It doesn't make sense to me that in the rates of today, we're historically low rates, right? So the average rate is still between 5 and 6%. That's a really good yield for whoever is making that. It doesn't make sense to me that banks and financial institutions where we're making it, where the other side of the retail is only earning less than 1%. And we think it's tied to a Fed reserve rate. But really, there's a huge gap that there's middlemen making money there. And what you've done is you've like removed so many of that middlemen and taken that yield and kind of given it back to B home holders.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And B home holders around the world who wouldn't even have access to the U.S. mortgage. You just reminded me of a story. There's a scene in one of the Star Wars movies where they're trying to get through a door, and the Jedi Master takes his lightsaber and stabs it right through the steel door, through the center of it. That's effectively what we've done. And that's a lot of steel, I got to say. There is, or whatever those things are made of. It really makes you realize that those layers were incredibly hard to break through. And it realistically took someone who could create a mortgage very, very quickly and had all the technology and the real-time data about that mortgage, that we could put it up on the blockchain and allow effectively a large pool of cash to purchase that mortgage in seconds, which in the mortgage industry, even making it, but once you make it, you still have to sell it to somebody else because mortgage companies don't have the cash to be able to buy the mortgages themselves. And that's what a bank is. It's basically, or an insurance company. Insurance companies do the same thing. They basically stockpile cash from these policies and turn right around and buy billions of dollars of mortgages that they balance sheet, which gives them an ongoing cash flow. This is the concept that I think people forget or miss about why banks are so powerful and almost immortal, right? At the end of the day, look at Wells Fargo. So they balance sheet about $275 billion worth of mortgages. That means every year, roughly, they have $8 billion of cash flow from that mortgage portfolio. Everybody at Wells could quit tomorrow and that money would still keep coming in. That's a tough institution to slow down. And then you realize the fact that they could lend that money out at 10 times leverage. And that's mandated by the government. And you've got a entity that is very difficult to build something that competes with that, but we think we're there.
One of the reasons that there's such a gap between where the rates are and then what the rates you and I get is because there's that in between $8 billion and we end up paying so much money in interest. So much of our payment goes to that. And before I get into the benefits and how to compete on rates, if someone went to baconcoin right now.com, what are they looking at?
Yeah, so today they're looking at two things. The first thing that they're seeing is the ability to basically take USDC and get BHome back. So effectively, BHome is a token, a coin, and that coin is wrapped around a pool of mortgages that are actually originated to the federal government standards, to Fannie Mae standards. So we've stuck with kind of the quote old school way of thinking about mortgage. We're not trying to change that piece. And there's two great things about that. The first thing that happens is that you recognize that pool of mortgages is visible. It's transparent. So unlike a lot of other stable coins where you have to guess what is underneath it, we list the homes on the blockchain. And we actually, the way the process works is when a borrower comes to us on the other side, we actually take a lien on their home and then mint an NFT. So we actually publish that NFT on the blockchain and say, here's the lien that we put on the home. Here's the address of the home. And that's the same information that we register with the county. So there's a link between kind of the real world and the blockchain world. And then you can imagine hundreds for thousands of those. And the lien is a dollar amount, as you know, from your mortgage. Let's call it $50,000. And that lien, dollar for dollar, backs the coin. So the stability isn't against a dollar bill in a bank account. The stability is against a home and a lien on a home, a physical asset. The next thing is that we collect the cash from the borrower when they're paying the money back. So as you make your payments, today that money flows through a banking system and they've got buildings and employees and a whole bunch of other stuff. In our system, that flows into an automated system that then takes that payment and distributes it out back to the BHome coin holders. So the core asset is generating cash flow for you, which is quite a bit different than the other systems that are out there that are getting cash flow from other means. The actual core asset in those cases, effectively just trying to pin to the dollar. This system is actually pinned to something we think that's much more stable and more valuable. And you get the cash flow, which is a good hedge against inflation and a core return that I think is what people are looking for when they're looking for what I would call a relatively safe investment.
What are the rates now? What's the current APY?
So the current APY is a combination of two APYs. So it's the core portfolio throws off about 3 to 5%. Of course, that's increasing in this environment.
Wow.
And then the APY is about 49% as of today. That's real time because that's tied to the rewards that you get from the other side of this. So once you buy your BHome and now you're a proud BHome owner and you're getting that cash flow on a monthly basis, the next is you can stake that BHome. And if you stake that BHome, then we are generating Bacon rewards, the governance token. So you generate those rewards. And of course, those are tradable out on the other DEXs, the decentralized exchanges. And so that APY is about 49% as of today, but that's, wildly fluctuates as you often see. So I think you rely on the 3 to 5% and the other stuff is the the icing on the cake.
So you have this protocol, and there's this stable coin BHome, and it doesn't change from a dollar basically.
That's correct.
Okay.
We're one of those companies that, as I mentioned before, where a lot is moving around, but it's dollar for dollar stable against the liens. The one thing we did do that is going to change, and this is actually, you're hearing it first, so cool. Breaking news. So we're actually what we did before was we flowed the cash flow back into the price of the coin. We thought that was really smart because we're going to save people on gas fees and all that. But oddly enough, a stable coin that goes from $1 to $1.06 is considered not a great thing. And so we're going to peg that straight to $1. And then the rewards will flow through a different system that we're excited about. So effectively, the idea is we'll basically go back to what the other stable coins do, which is dollar for dollar stable, in our case, against the liens on homes. And then the cash flow will come in the form of a reward, effectively, like you see on other sites.
I mean, you've decentralized and de-risked, and just basically like have taken risk. You've taken all the different pieces of the loan, mortgage, origination process, and you've like broken them down into like Lego pieces or puzzle pieces. And you allow each one to kind of like operate still in like a vertical integration where they're all connected and incentivized. But I'm trying to think of like you've retailed in what institutional capital does in the mortgage industry, and that is making the best yields.
Yeah, exactly. And then handing that yield back to the customer, not keeping it for ourselves, which is the key. And I think, there have been some attempts at this before that are very centralized. You have people who built their own blockchains and their institutions focused. I come from a community internet-based background. Like my thing is, how do you basically build from scratch? I did a couple companies. One of them was in, the peer-to-peer space around, kind of sharing what versus, eBay, where you share what you have. And I learned a couple really important lessons, which is, at the end of the day, participation in the ecosystem is the win. And if you go into it thinking you're going to own the ecosystem, you are going to get killed. And I remember AOL, right, trying to swim up that stream and saying they were going to own the internet, and the internet rolled over the top of them like they weren't even there, right? And so when we started this project, we realized we couldn't do it alone, and that we were going to have to get involved in the community and provide a lot of value and hopefully get a lot of value back. So if you look at the system, it's actually, not only have we rebuilt from the ground up the infrastructure for mortgage, we've allowed other people to participate in that. So if you're an originator, which is what we do at the LoanSnap site, you can come to us and you can sell your loans to us. If you're a servicer, you can come in and help service loans, which is basically collecting payments and distributing them on the blockchain. And that's the second big benefit of BHome as a stablecoin. It's distributed. You think a lot of these stablecoins, and they're like, oh, great, we have it audited, and you realize that all that money is sitting in a bank account somewhere at one single bank or maybe two single banks, whereas this is going to be distributed across a whole bunch of originators, a whole bunch of servicers, and a whole bunch of investors, in this case, consumers who just hold BHome in their wallets.
So you have consumers who can hold BHome in their wallet, and what they're doing is providing liquidity to you guys to potentially get more liens on more properties and distribute that cash flow. And at the same time, you have originators, which right now is just you. You're saying that the protocol is open where I could essentially take my properties. If there's a technical and legal mechanism to take my properties and put them into the protocol, I could benefit from all the same type of that same ecosystem. Other people can start earning cash flow. I can start, and then will I get a origination percentage?
Yep, you'll get a piece.
Really?
Exactly. Exactly. And that was, that's tough. It's kind of one of the lessons I've learned. It's great.
The whole new industry here. You're reinventing the wheel.
Well, I hope, but you learn pretty early that creating your own competition is actually a positive thing, not a negative thing. And you're right. It is has the potential to recreate the mortgage industry as we know it. And we're really excited about that to benefit the consumer, because once you unlock that potential, what you just said was really important, right? Is the potential of doing that, the potential of having these different types of loans, having these different types of products. We have a new product called the Art Law, which is effectively like a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit,
Sure.
with all the bad stuff taken out. So the bad things about a HELOC, the good thing about a HELOC is you can do it over your existing loan. The bad thing is it's an ARM, it's an adjustable rate mortgage, and we all know those are very scary. And once you pull it down, you can't pay it back. It's over.
Yes.
You pull it down and then pay it back, and you're done. This is a brand new type of loan. So it's a line of credit against your house, except it's a fixed rate line and it's infinite in duration, and you can pay it back and pull it down all you want. So we could have never done that before. No one in the mortgage industry would have purchased that loan ever. Like they don't think that way. And that's the nice thing about the community we have and the Discord. They do, right? And they're excited about providing value to homeowners and getting a fair return, right? And not fleecing the public, which is where we've been before.
One of the ways that our industry stand on its own 2 feet, like you said, like so we can get that Wells Fargo effect. So we could be a multi-trillion-dollar industry and doing our own cash. We had like $1 million of what you do, securitizing everything from homes to potential patents to maybe liens on lawsuits, things like you could securitize everything. Because I want to like zoom out a little bit here. When you go to like centralized DeFi like Nexo, Voyager, Celsius, all these places, and you're getting yield anywhere from 3 to 10% on your Bitcoin and stablecoins. These companies or the stablecoins themselves actually have to take your money, sell it for dollars, and then buy commercial paper, like traditional commercial paper. Have to put it in
teams
banks.
of people that do that. Yeah. Exactly.
And they're only getting a certain amount of yield. So therefore, we're only getting a certain amount of yield. And we're still giving money to what we call, like you said, the rent seekers, those who are not in our industry, who are benefiting from us. But if UST, USDC, Tether start to back their stablecoins by BHome, the yields are going to go up, our industry will go up, and we'll start to finally break free of the Bitcoin and crypto and the NASDAQ correlation. That's when we break free from institution. Is that what you kind of see too?
And I think that's a great insight, and use their own tools against them. Right. That's the thing is, here's the fear that I've heard a little bit in the crypto world is, oh, we don't do that. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day and said, well, real world stuff hurts my head. I'm like, maybe so, but there's $13 trillion of those out there, and governments and financial institutions and wealthy people have been using this tool against everybody else for many, many years, making tons of money and giving very little of it away to the people who provide the cash. And that, to me, is a mistake. I think when you're building something new, just like the internet was, it's important to leverage the existing infrastructure and technologies and honestly, so to speak, tricks, right, in order to provide value. And so what I worry about is exactly what you said. You have all these stable coins who have treasury management groups that are same treasury management groups that exist in big corporations, with all the issues that you have with those and the trust you have to have in them to manage your money, where this is a direct relationship. You get to go on the blockchain. You can see the houses that back the coin. You can see the cash flows that are coming from them. It goes into your wallet, and you can actually see the specifications of the loans that go into the pool. And that to me is one of the really important things is, if you think about these other stable coins, no one has any idea what the assets are backing those stable coins. There's a little bit of like, well, it's treasuries.
There's auditing, There's some auditing and stuff, but that can be fugazi.
We know how that goes. I mean, we don't
know what accounting holes those go down. The more we can get on the blockchain, the better. And I was going to ask you, like, what benefits the blockchain provides. Obviously, it's like you just answered one of them, but like, if there were just databases, right, and as we weren't blockchains where they were distributed computationally across everywhere, and there was federated mechanisms for having due process. If this didn't exist and you just, did this on public databases, if your company would have disappeared, the whole thing would have disappeared too, right?
Right. And we tried. We started this project over 3 years ago when DeFi was really, really early. And we built a couple systems. And that one of our investors, two of our investors asked that very question, why just build this on Stripe? And so we did the math, we did the work to see what it would actually cost. And then we recognized the real value of the blockchain, right? Is that would be incredibly expensive at a couple 100,000 people who own bHome. At millions, there's just no way. I mean, just technologically not possible, and a huge burden on the company. And that's when we went down the DeFi rabbit hole and recognized that if we participated in this ecosystem and provided value, not only were we leveraging the blockchain technology, but we were leveraging the community that had been created around it. So as an example of that, that's why we chose to wrap NFTs around the lien. And here's the crazy thing about that. It seems like, okay, a no-brainer. But some people are like, well, why would you do that? Well, because that NFT around that lien has value everywhere on the blockchain. So the idea is that if you trust the person who wrapped that lien with an NFT and you trust them to keep those in sync, you can lend against that and you don't have to be LoanSnap or even an originator. You can take that NFT other places and get a loan against it. And that's one of the pieces of value we're trying to provide to the chain, right? Is, hey, here's this asset class that's been rolling around for a long time. And a lot of people are trying to tokenize the real estate itself. And there's a lot of arguments about why that is probably a bad idea financially, because you got to create an LLC and it's complicated. This is a super simple document that any county in the United States knows how to process, a lien on a home. And the first step of the process, because I know you and your listeners get into this kind of stuff, we hide this a little bit because it's, we don't want people to have to deal with the complexity. But when you come to us and you do one of these loans, all of that is hidden from the consumer. There's nothing about the blockchain that pokes through to that consumer experience. And underneath the covers, when we take that lien out, we actually exchange that lien for bHome on the back end. So think about that. Here is for the first time ever, you're taking a lien out on your house and you can directly get a cryptocurrency back from it. Now, on our side, what we're doing is then lending against that bHome, and there's a lot of machinations that happen. But I envision a future where people like yourself, will have homes that they own and be able to exchange that lien for bHome, which is effectively a hedge against the U.S. market. And now you're taking one home and taking out a lien, and you're getting back a coin that is backed by a pool of mortgages across the United States. I mean, just from a core investing theory perspective, distributed risk is a lot better than single point risk.
If I could take all my properties and put them on a blockchain and get a guaranteed credit line against that at very good rates that beat out the consumer price index or inflation, quote unquote, I wouldn't hold cash at all. What would be the point?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here with cash I'm sitting here with cash trying to find yield, chasing that yield. I gotta get a t-shirt. It's chasing the yield. You're chasing the yield all the time with cash, where you buy a property, then you can ride, you could ride the world. But at the same time, getting the property is almost impossible now. Oh my God. It's like, even if you own your own business, independently wealthy, it's almost impossible to get a house nowadays. That's why they're building multifamilies. I read the statistic this morning there. The rate of multifamily property being built are just going up by leaps and bounds, and single family are kind of slowing down a little bit because people can't afford single family homes anymore. They have to, builders are building multi-properties, 1,000, 2,000 square feet. I want to add.
Can I just, because that's a really important point. The problem is those projects can't get funded. And that's the really crazy thing. And so we're actually working with a couple of these groups who are particularly working in neighborhoods that are, not that great. The economies have had trouble, and, they had a lot of issues around foreclosures and things like that. So they're building multifamily, and we are going to create a coin for them that is solely for backing that particular multifamily project.
That's so cool.
So imagine being able to buy a coin that not only distributes your risk, but also supports the community that you live in and other people financing their homes.
Yeah, I mean, if there was this mechanism right now, I would use that to build affordable housing where I live, because the mechanism to do it would be easy, and then the risk is not always on me. So
right.
I imagine,
and that's exactly what's going on. That's exactly what those projects are doing, is building affordable housing using financing vehicles that are effectively the people who are most impacted by the by the buildings being created and the home values increasing in the area.
We've talked about like smart cities and that's exactly where this kind of falls in. Like if we have these Web3 smart cities, this is the perfect plug and play. And imagine if like integrated into the protocol, if my city had the ability, and it's not hard technically, to like collect property taxes directly from the NFT themselves to fund the dude. You're talking about overhead would go away. These cities would need 10 people to run themselves. We'd be living in a much more, and so, but put that to the side for a second. One of the reasons I got into Bitcoin and crypto is that I grew up like a geeky, nerdy type of kid, and people always like take the first impression of you. They judge you and you have to like come out of that hole, right? Like, and now I'm a middle class white kid. So imagine what if it was like if I grew up a minority in a minority group or whatever, it would be that much harder. But at the same time, what I love about this, it's almost like removing the who, and it's like this, it's more of the what. But there's a reason I hate to use the word profile, but we originate loans, and reason that your job is difficult because you have to check what is the person's ability to actually repay that loan. Is that going to go away as part of the risk? Will you not care who exactly is the owner of the property and their ability to pay it back? Because now that the mechanism for like defaulting you see what I'm saying? It like my brother just bought a house. He spent a month on the origination, just like, oh my God, like, and I wanted to help him with his down payment. So then they went into my bank statements, and then they're asking me to prove my job. It's like tentacles. They almost gave up, and he owns his own business. Like, does that go away?
It does. It does. And I think it's a lot to unpack there. I think the first thing that I've learned, and I think, is part of our core values at LoanSnap and at Bacon, is that once you remove the tools of discrimination, you make discrimination not difficult, impossible. And so, like you said, like a lot of this is about ability to repay. That's an incredibly low bar. Like if you look at the actual ability, there are laws around this, right? An ability to repay is an incredibly low bar that most people pass. But I'll give you an example for this group of future cities. Income is $30,000 to $35,000 a year, and the credit score is 680 plus. That's a great potential borrower. However, the current system has so much overhead, they can't lend money to that person and make money. That's the real truth. So the real truth is they're so inefficient that they can't make money at that level. We can. And that's the awesome power of the blockchain is bringing affordable housing to people, because mechanically we can and still have a business, right? And afford to do so. So I do think that'll go away, but in some ways not for the reasons people think. Like, and that's the other, there's so many lies in this industry, but one of them is that they care about the borrower's ability to repay. Look, they've got a lien on a physical asset that is worth a certain amount of money. Exactly. And, everybody looks at 2008 like, oh, those poor banks, look at all the suffering. Oh, really? Right? I mean, they were sitting on a pile of assets that turned out to be so valuable over the next 5 years. It was ridiculous. And look at it now. The federal government was buying mortgages hand over fist during the crisis as fast as they possibly could. Why? Well, everybody has the answer to that now. Right? That's a lot of money. And so I think that the idea that ability to repay and background and a lot of that stuff matters as much as it does is going to fade. I think the other thing is, as we broaden the investor base, that changes. When you're an insurance company and you balance sheet $10 billion worth of loans, your bar for the quality of those loans is incredibly high. And I mean by quality, they just don't want to think about it. They have a big spreadsheet of these things and a team of people who analyze them. They just want it to give them the cash flow. And they drive this because they've got the money. Well, now we're in the driver's seat. And the driver's seat are DeFi wallets all around the world who have a different set of ideals and a different set of requirements for what they want. They want 3 to 5% tied to a lien on a home. And maybe they care about the borrower. I kind of doubt it. I think they care about the cash flow that comes back, and that the DAO is managing it in an ethical and business positive way. And part of that is treating borrowers a little bit differently than we do today. For instance, I think foreclosure as a concept will eventually go away. Because I think what you'll end up with are these workout plans built into mortgage. If you don't do a mortgage, maybe the lien increases in size. Maybe you miss 5 payments and you roll those 5 payments together and you take a $50,000 lien to a $55,000. I think that's a better approach than kicking somebody out of their home, selling it, and then collecting all of the upside that the borrower would have normally gotten.
Well, also foreclosure is just, I don't know what states, what other states are like. I know Florida has a quick deed system, but like
Right.
I invested a few years ago into a small fund that invested into New York, like horse farms and stuff like that. Don't ask me why.
I grew up on a ranch, so I feel you on that.
I need to stay in my lane more, but I like to just experiment and fail. But speaking of failure, what am I learning now? It was pre-COVID. The company defaulted, and
Right.
2 years still in the foreclosure. 2 years later, there are no other creditors. It's just a frivolous, like, the guy. It's so easy to just like appeal and to throw like, oh, my mother died, so he threw the birth certificate to the judge. That's just 6 months. The judge is busy right now. It's just like this system is messed up.
Yeah, well, 100%. And foreclosure is bad for everybody.
It's bad for everyone.
Yeah, the untold story is of Detroit. Or I went to USC and I didn't get on-campus housing, so I lived in Watts for 2 years. The untold story there is really foreclosure crushes a neighborhood, absolutely crushes it, because not only does it destroy value of the homes in the nearby area, you have empty lots, and empty lots scare people. And you come in to buy a house and you see a dilapidated old house with a chain link fence around it. That's not really a neighborhood anybody gets excited about.
So this is the difference here, and we're getting to the root of it. In the traditional industry, you get bank originating loan, and then if something happens, it goes back to bank. Bank has to foreclose, has to then go resell the banks are not in the business of being real estate. I'm surprised the bank hasn't bought out a real estate office to save on these fees. I'm sure they have. But the difference here is that originator creates the loan, goes on chain, but then if there's a foreclosure issue or there's 3 months of non-payment or whatever, the protocol has it built in, essentially it goes back to people who actually want it.
That's right. That's right.
And
I think, 100%. That's the aha, exactly. And it also gets back to the core of the value to the investors, and in this case, the holders of B Home. What do they really care about? Well, I mean, sure, they care about the human beings, but from their portfolio, they care about the cash flow. And so how do you preserve that cash flow? Well, you don't preserve that cash flow by foreclosing on the house and selling it and putting the cash back into the system to have to go buy more loans. You do that by using technology and a lot of these systems in order to preserve that cash flow and that borrower for the long term. And that probably means a short-term, quote, sacrifice. And so the system, the way it works today is you get into trouble. You usually don't know you're in trouble. That's one of the things that we see in our system is people just don't know they're not going to be able to make their payments in 90 days. Then they default. And then, of course, the foreclosure process, as you pointed out, which is painful, gets started. When they do that, they go to the debt consolidators who take even more of their money up front to fix the problem and then charge them over time to make the same payments they could have made before. What we're envisioning is a world where the originators and servicers are incentivized to work that stuff out early in the process so that that borrower who basically would have, had to move out of their house and would not be paying their bills are kept in the house and able to pay their bills over time. And when things get better, they can pay the lien down. That to me seems like a better situation than foreclosing on a bunch of houses like they did in downtown Detroit and effectively destroying those neighborhoods and the property values at the same time.
It's a stupid question, but what happened in those situations? So no company, if you go to a mortgage company now, if you have $1 million house, they're not going to give you more than $300,000. So if you can't pay that $300,000 over 90 days, can't the person just sell their house and repay what's owed? How is it that people lose their whole house in that scenario?
Yeah. So in that scenario, and obviously that's a high-end house, our average is around 350, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, that scenario, is a tough one, right? So what happens effectively is because foreclosures are so difficult and painful, they start the companies usually start the process early, as fast as they can. Because if they think a borrower is going to go south on them, they're going to start early because they know it's, like you said, 2 years, and it's a real battle. The other is it's the only tool that they have. Right? They're these big companies. I mean, there's a spreadsheet sitting in front of someone, and all they're looking at is the red flashing signal that says, "Hey, these 5 loans are going south. We need to do something about them. Hand them to the foreclosure department." Versus, "Hey, how do we work this out and preserve the cash flow in the long run?" And it's just a misalignment, right? I mean, I think that if you went and talked to the investors in those mortgages, the people who bought them, they would say, "Hey, I love this. I want to keep the cash flow. Don't foreclose on the property. Figure out a way to work it out if you can." And that's what I think we're offering, both for consumers, which is a benefit, and for investors. And that's, I think, one of the big problems with the current financial system. The misalignment of the individual with the goals of the corporation, but they're completely misaligned. Look at credit cards. They are just designed to take money from consumers. There's no net benefit for a consumer, particularly at a 17% interest rate.
I need to close all my credit cards. It's ridiculous already.
Yeah. And that a lot of what we do on the LoanSnap side of things is analyze their credit cards and say, "Hey, you're losing $1,000 a month to credit card interest," and people think we're lying to them. They think we're mistaken. We're like, "Well, here's the data." They just don't have any idea that not paying that credit card off every month is actually costing them money, just like it would cost money if they were buying 20 extra lattes a day.
So in those situations, like in Detroit in 2008, most people were underwater because what they owed was more than either the equity they had or the value of the house. And therefore, is that kind of the situations that happened back then?
Yeah, 2008 is such a, we could do a whole series on it. Yeah, it's really scary. The real culprit in that was the credit default swaps that, oddly enough, were based on pools of mortgages, but those pools of mortgages were graded by a quote independent rating agency who rated a whole pool of mortgages as AAA when in fact there was C and D stuff in there. And the credit default swaps, of course, these leverage instruments that were built on top of it, collapsed when people realized that wasn't the case. However, you're right. In 2008, because of that unwinding, you had property values plummeting. People's houses got foreclosed on. Once one went down, then a bunch of others went down. Everybody's home value went down. And then, of course, the ride was over. And you had a lot of people looking at their financial statements and realizing that, what they were paying on their mortgage was way too high, right? That the value of the house had gone down so much that they were never going to recoup that money that they were paying in.
Oh, yeah, because the interest rates were really high back then too.
Right. So you could make the argument that was a relatively sound financial decision, other than, the foreclosure on your record, which is another, I think it's a 7-year term that people will look at it and they won't touch you for a home.
So is there a business model here in buying up like pre-foreclosure properties? Well, again, they wouldn't really get to that foreclosure if like there wasn't much equity left. And if there isn't, then may not be worth it because there's but I'm talking about like you can do cool things here. Like a lot of people want to create like monthly payments for their property taxes, right? Like if this big property tax payment, if you don't have a mortgage, you got to pay this big once a year payment. You could do cool things like NFT debt to create monthly payments for that. And then I'd pay 2% if I could monthly cash flow my property taxes. That's value to me right there. It's like really cool stuff you can do.
100%. I mean, I'm hopeful that as we build out this ecosystem, a lot of people will come with ideas like that'll make this. And we already have people paying their mortgages in crypto. We literally just have a smart contract that pulls the money out of their wallet every month automatically. We could stream that. You could pay your mortgage daily if you wanted to.
That's cool.
You could pay it every other week. Yeah, and so I'm excited at where we are. I'm more excited about where we're going to be and the things that are going to get built on top of this infrastructure. Now that it's transparent, now that it's distributed, and now that people have the ability to participate in that ecosystem, both on the investor side and the contributor side. all these people that were kind of firewalled off from each other can now collaborate, and kind of the building blocks that you mentioned, we can now put them together in different ways and create new products. As an example of that, imagine that somebody looks at your financial situation and says, well, actually, we should refinance your car loan, your student loan, that personal loan, your credit cards, all at the same time, and put you on a much better financial track. Versus today, we have to go to 5 different companies to accomplish that, and none of them talk to each other. And oh, by the way, that car loan that you have prevents you from refinancing your house until you get that done. So there's actually a process that you have to go through to get there.
That's so cool. It's so crazy. I want to understand, like, what is the actual legal mechanism of turning a property into an NFT, and can that be like done with any type of asset?
Yeah, so there is a core argument that's going on right now, argument, discussion. So there's kind of a group of people that are like, well, we're going to wrap NFTs around everything in the real world. And I think we will get there, right? That is coming. Currently, a lot of that is you wrap an NFT around an LLC that actually owns whatever the piece of property is. And anybody who knows LLC law knows that that is very complicated. And if things go south, I'm not sure your situation if that was an LLC, because it's difficult, right? Because you've got a lot of different people arguing. There's a lot of structure. There's a lot of laws around LLCs. But I do think we'll get there. We took a different approach, and we took it for 2 reasons. One is that if you look at a lot of the regulations around, it is basically core to that regulation that if you take an asset and you split it up into little pieces, that's a security. I mean, that's one of the things the SEC does.
Yeah,
that's a pretty straight line. What we did was stay away from all of that and say, well, we're going to wrap an NFT around a lien, and a lien, it isn't the property, and it isn't something that is a new construction. There's no LLC involved. There's no arbitrary owner group or anything like that. The NFT wraps something that we do today, and every mortgage company does today. And we think that might be a better direction for particular assets. Do I really care or want to care about the maintenance of that? So there's a good example. In the LLC world and wrapping the NFT around the whole thing, if we have to do maintenance on, I think there was a house in Aspen, what does that mean? Does that mean that maintenance burden gets shared amongst all the LLC holders? And what if somebody says, no, I don't want to do that? Whereas a lien just says, hey, we have a right to a certain amount of value against that house. And as you pointed out, that's usually quite a bit lower than the value of the house. And then we ask the owner, and there's insurance around this, to be responsible for that. So they have to maintain the quality of the house. They can't, burn it down or, remodel
a servicing
it
company, essentially, like a maintenance and servicing company that gets a piece of the percentage. The cool thing about it is that the smart contract travels with the NFT. So the originator is always going to get his percentage. If I take my NFT and I go to Nexo or Voyager, and Voyager offers me 7%, or a better rate or whatever it is, I'm going to take that there. But you originated that loan, and this guy services that. So everyone, that's the beauty. I keep trying to explain to you, like, NFT are just like smart contracts, but they're like pieces of code that can travel from chain to chain or whatever you want to call it.
Well, and here's what will really blow your mind. And we're already seeing the benefit of that. So we have some very smart people in our Discord. And one of the things they do is they watch the interest rate on the page for the loans we give out. Right. So they're not watching the Fed rate. They're watching what they call the bacon rate. And they want to see when the bacon rate goes low.
Is there a website?
And then do their, baconcoin.com.
But what do they want to do when that happens? Sorry.
So what they do is they're hunting for when money, goes into the system, the rate comes down as more money goes into the system because we've got more money. So we lend it out at a cheaper rate. Right. And so they watch and look for liquidity to go in. And when the rate drops, and they're watching this on the chain. We don't publish this on the website. So these are deep crypto people. Then something interesting happened. So we thought, well, okay, that's great. We had one guy who got into the process and came to us about midway through the process and said, hey, I saw the rate went down. I want to refinance. Now, normally any bank or originator would say, absolutely not. Of course, what did we do? We said, absolutely, because we have an NFT wrapped around the lien. We just blew that NFT up and created a new one with the new lien and then a loan against it. And we were done. And that's when your example, let's say Nexo does that. And rather than going through a whole refinance process, you basically just blow up the one NFT, and then turn around and recreate a new one with Nexo at a different rate. And I think that's the power, separating the lien from the loan. That's one of the things that we didn't talk about earlier that's key to the technology is before your mortgage and your lien are tied together. Like the minute you get a mortgage, you get a lien. In this case, they're separate entities. That means that lien, your power, the very first moment when you get your NFT for your home, it's a lien on the house that you own. Not that the bank owns, you actually own it as a person. And you can take that lien anywhere you want. And in the case of, another originator sniping out a loan, they can do that. They can say, well, look, we're willing to lend at 5% against that NFT, whereas you've already got one at 6%. And that will be a button on the interface of your app that you make your payments on. It'll literally say, hey, so-and-so would like to refinance your loan. Click here to say yes. And your payment will go down to $600 a month versus $700 a month, all without all the paperwork and crap that you do today in order to get a refinance.
What's the current rate that you guys are offering loans at now?
So right now is a core loan. So the first is what we call them is in the 4 to 5% range.
Wow.
And then the smart locks, which is a lien on top of the existing lien. So it allows you to keep that loan that you already have and hopefully that great rate that you got over the last couple of years and borrow more money, but that's at a higher rate. That'll be about 7 to 8% rate. And that's because it's a much more flexible product and usually a lot smaller, right? It's usually, people borrowing between $50,000 and $100,000 and they've already got a $300,000 lien on their home. And the benefit is that you're paying a much lower interest rate on the core amount of money you're borrowing. And the advantage for the product that we provided is that it's a fixed rate loan. So unlike any other line of credit product that you see out there, you pay that same amount every month for the term of the loan or until it's paid off.
I could see originators competing now and going to new communities and paying new owners to open up these lines for them. It's like, hey, you don't need to use it. It doesn't cost you anything. We'll pay you to open this line that you can always use or turn your house into an NFT for free or something like that. We'll pay you.
That's a great idea. I mean, I think the idea that so cool. This is a safety line, right? And that you should probably,
this helps me sleep at night, knowing that this is always an option for me. Honestly.
Right. And it's there. And the great thing about that is you've taken something that can be a real burden for someone or force them to go get another credit card, which we both know is not the greatest idea at 17% interest. And it's like, hey, you've got $100,000 at 5% just sitting. And in fact, I think that will be a credit card. That'll be the new kind of credit card, which is a credit card against your home that is flexible and at a fixed rate that will never change, which we all know is not something that you're going to see in the market from the banks and other financial institutions.
I would love to be able to do that. That's my next tackle is the credit card industry. We'll figure it out. But I mean, oh man, that's all the time we have today. Karl Jacob, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on Untold Stories. I didn't even realize how much time has gone.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome. Me either, actually, but that was well spent. I mean, this is fantastic to talk to somebody who knows about this stuff as much as you do and is open to the possibilities. I think that's what gets me really excited is not necessarily where we're at, which I'm excited about where we are today. We've already got about 26 homes that we've financed just through this, starting from zero. It's really what's possible.
I'm going to have my listeners, if anyone's interested in getting in touch with Karl or with finding out more about the process, or if they're interested, you can go to baconcoin.com, but you can also email me. My email's on untoldstories.com. You can email me and I'll forward it over and get you guys in touch. And this is so cool. Thanks for taking the time and teaching us today.
You bet. Well, thank you for having me. Take care.